Have you ever been through something so painful that you could not imagine what possible purpose it could serve? Maybe you lost something you had worked years to build. Maybe someone you loved deeply hurt you in a way you did not deserve. Maybe life handed you something so heavy that you could not understand why it was yours to carry. Maybe you have asked in the quiet moments what any of it was for. My name is Eli, and today's story is about a young woman who was so broken by what she had lost that she stopped believing anything good could come from it, until a sculptor showed her something in a piece of broken stone that she had never seen before. Clara was 31 years old and had been through 2 years of loss that had come one after another without pause. First her mother, then her marriage, then a business she had spent 4 years building that collapsed when her partner withdrew without warning. She had not caused any of these things. She had not been careless or reckless. Life had simply handed her a season of loss that seemed designed to take everything she had built her sense of self around. She was not bitter exactly. She was something quieter and harder to name, hollowed out, as if the repeated impact of grief had carved something essential out of her that she did not know how to replace. She began taking long evening walks in a part of the city she had not explored before. One evening she turned down a narrow street and found an open studio, its wide doors pulled back, warm light spilling out onto the pavement. Inside, an old man named Bernard was working at a large piece of stone. He was chipping at it slowly with a hammer and chisel, turning what looked like a damaged, irregular block into something gradually taking shape. Clara stood in the doorway watching. After a while, Bernard looked up, completely unsurprised to find a stranger watching him. "Come in if you like," he said simply, and turned back to his work. Clara stepped inside. The studio was full of finished pieces, faces and figures carved from stone in various states of completion. She watched him work in silence. Then she asked, "How do you know what shape to find inside it?" Bernard did not look up. "I do not find the shape," he said. "The stone tells me where it wants to go. My job is to remove what is hiding it." Clara looked at the rough, irregular block he was working on. "But it is damaged," she said. "Parts of it are broken." Bernard nodded. "Yes, most of the best ones are." Clara was quiet. Bernard set down his chisel for a moment and looked at the stone carefully. "Do you see this crack here?" He traced a long fracture running through one side of the block. "Most people look at that and see damage. I look at it and see where the light will fall when it is finished." Clara stared at the crack. "The breaks," Bernard said quietly, "are often what give the final piece its character. A stone with no history, no pressure, no fracture lines, it is technically perfect, but it rarely produces anything you cannot forget." Clara sat down on a wooden stool nearby. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I have had quite a lot of breaking recently." Bernard picked up his chisel again. "I know," he said, though she had not told him anything. "I could see it when you walked in." Clara looked at her hands. "I do not know what any of it was for. The losses, all of it. I cannot find a reason." Bernard worked steadily as he spoke. "Pain is not a lesson delivered neatly with the explanation attached," he said. "It does not arrive with a note explaining what you are supposed to learn from it. It simply arrives, and for a long time it just hurts. Then what? Clara asked. Bernard paused his work and looked at her directly. Then, if you do not let it harden you, it begins to do something else. It removes everything you thought was essential but was not. It carves away the things you had built your identity around that were never the real you in the first place. And slowly, underneath all of that, something becomes visible that was there all along. Something that only the breaking could reveal. Clara looked at the emerging shape in the stone. But it takes so long, she said. Bernard smiled. Yes, that is part of what it is teaching you. Clara returned to the studio several times in the weeks that followed. She did not always talk to Bernard. Sometimes she simply sat and watched him work. But something in her slowly began to change. She started noticing things she had not had room to notice before the losses. A patience she had not known she possessed. A clarity about what actually mattered to her, now that so many things that had felt essential had been removed. A capacity for sitting with uncertainty that she had never needed before, because her life before had moved too quickly to require it. She did not stop grieving. The losses were real and they remained, but the grief began to feel different. Less like something happening to her, more like something moving through her towards something she could not yet fully see. One evening, she arrived at the studio to find Bernard standing back from a finished piece. A figure clearly weathered, clearly carrying something heavy, but beautiful in a way that a smoother, less complicated piece could never have been. Bernard looked at it for a long time. Then he said, "The ones shaped by pressure are always the most interesting to live with." Clara stood beside him and understood, for the first time, what he had been trying to show her. My perspective on this story is simple. Pain does not arrive with a purpose label. It arrives as pain, and for a long time, that is all it is. But if you do not let it turn you toward bitterness, it often does something else over time. It removes, it clarifies. It reveals what was real underneath everything you had built your life around. The breaks in us are not evidence of failure. They are often exactly where the most interesting light comes through. If this story spoke to something you have been carrying, please subscribe to Jerry Tales and like this video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.